It's time to step into the Coming Out Lounge, a cool, safe space to be true to your sexual self. With your host, Rick Clemens. Rick has helped hundreds of people come out of the closet, and now each week he's bringing you cool insights for loving and accepting yourself, boosting your self-confidence, and living a guilt-free, purpose-filled life on the other side of the closet doors. Cuddle up with yourself and get ready for heartwarming coming out stories, ideas for living authentically, and tips for being fully self-expressed. Now here's your host, Coming Out Coach Rick.
Hey, closet dwellers and closet busters. It is time once again for the Coming Out Lounge. I'm Rick Clemens, that guy that, I really try to help you simplify your life to make big, bold moves so you can come out and be whoever you want to be in your life and whatever that looks like. It may be sexual orientation. It may be moving and grooving to a new job or a new gig, whatever it might be for you. And today we're going to address something that's really about how do you learn to love without boundaries? And what does that look like? Why do you do it? What do you need to know about that? And here's what I know. I know that who you love and how you create relationship is really nobody's business but your own. But for some people out there in the world, they think that's everybody's business. Everybody's got to be doing this stuff. So we're going to kind of simplify that today with my guest and really talk about what does this look like when you are in a sex positive, polyamorous relationship that may not always be just about sex. It could be about emotional intimacy or anything else. Her name is Kitty Chambliss, and she is the gal behind Loving Without Boundaries. And she's also a really good friend of mine and one of my World Domination Summit peeps that I love getting to see each and every year. And because she's here this time frame, it is in the middle of National Pride Month. That's why I brought her on. I thought it'd be a great place to bring yet another diverse voice about what does it mean to have pride. So welcome to the Coming Out Lounge, my good friend, Kitty Chambliss. Welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And, we met a couple of years ago at World Domination Summit. I have to say we both had a couple of drinks and we really liked each other. And then things went on from there. But I loved the conversation we initially had about, people being who they are and what does it look like. And really, I would say we're kind of in the beginning of the throes of what polyamory is all about as a society. I know it's been around. I say it's been around forever because I think people have loved who they want to love, but for different reasons in many different ways. But it's really becoming part of a conversation that is pretty damn new, right?
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely getting in the mainstream media more now. So, and I know a lot of times when I do talk to people and I do either come out as polyamorous or we have that conversation, I'm actually surprised on both sides by how many people had not heard of the word polyamory before and also how many people have. So It's definitely still in the newer area in the sense that not everyone knows what that word is just yet.
Yeah. So I'd love, Kitty, for you to I'm always about, you know me well enough. I'm always about simplifying things so people really get stuff. So what's your simplified definition for you of what polyamory is all about?
I would say, to me, polyamory is simply about allowing the space to have multiple loving, intimate relationships in the way that suits you and with the consent of all parties involved. So it is the opposite of cheating, because sometimes one of the myths around polyamory is, so that's just license to cheat, right? And it's definitely not. It's about being open communication and working on honesty and coming from a place of integrity.
Yeah. And I think that's the big difference is it is quote unquote a new license, but I don't consider it a new license to play. I consider it a license to be really truthful about who you are, what you want in your life, how you want relationships to be in your life, and the kind of people you want to have relationships with. And it is about eliminating some of the stuff that really causes heartache in relationships, which is the dishonesty, the integrity, the cheating, all of that stuff that goes along with why most people have trouble, even in some of the best of open relationships. There's always still this really interesting space that we don't talk about it. We know about it, but we don't talk. And I think if that works, great. But most often it doesn't really work. And I think you could probably share lots of stories of how people have not made that work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a lot of experience on both sides of the fence of cheating, as well as both sides of the fence of monogamy versus polyamory, because I grew up in being taught that there was only one way to do relationships, heteronormative monogamy. And so I started to play by that playbook as I was growing up, trying to conform and fit in. And what I ended up doing was I ended up becoming a cheating serial monogamist, and I hurt people, and I hated myself at times because I knew what I was doing was wrong. And I did that for probably 10 or 15 years, honestly. And then I just came to a place where I thought, I just don't want to be this deceitful, lying, hurtful person. That's not who I want to be. And at that time, I hadn't heard of the word polyamory either. So I eventually met the man who is now my husband, and we found out that he was a former cheater as well. Mm-hmm. And we just decided, you know what? Let's just, love each other, enjoy this relationship, grow a foundation, but let's be open to how this relationship looks and works and not be so focused on what society is telling us it's supposed to look like. Mm-hmm. And eventually we did get married, but we wrote our own vows, and we just left out and forsake all others, but all the other language is in there, love until, death do us part, and be good to each other, and that type of language. And then eventually I read the book, The Ethical Slut. And I tell the story of it was like, so the sun came down from the heavens and shone down on me. And I was like, oh my God, and there were so many epiphanies I had in that moment. But one of them was, first of all, oh my God, people can live like this and it sounds so beautiful and I want that. But then the second thought was, oh my God, I always thought there was something wrong with me. Mm-hmm. And now I'm learning that there's this whole other way to build relationships and have love. And I just had never been exposed to it before. So it was such a relief, frankly, to find out that in my mind, I'd been polyamorous all along and just didn't understand what that even was. I just thought that I was a bad person or I was wrong, Mm-hmm. So
for most people in the polyamory world, I'm going to make a blanket statement here because I know quite a few people in this world. But I will say for most of them, it isn't just about sex, or it isn't just about, oh, I want to connect with this person and this is what's missing from my current relationship. It's really about, I just connect with people in different ways, and I happen to connect with this person this way, this person this way, and you may connect with the person you're in your primary relationship on all those fronts, and you may not. There is no one way to do polyamory, right?
Absolutely. That's another running joke is, there are as many ways to do polyamory as there are stars in the sky. And to me, that's partly what the beauty is because we are all unique snowflakes. We're all beautiful creatures. And so each individual gets to design their relationships and their life around who they are. And each relationship can have its own life of its own. And an extreme example I can give of this is one of my very good friends who's also been a friend of my husband's. She is not polyamorous, and she knows that we are. We did come out to her many years ago. And she said what she loves about her relationship with my husband is that their friendship is so much deeper than the friendship she has with her other girlfriends' husbands, partly because of polyamory. Like they can have really deep conversations and say they love each other and call each other beautiful, and nobody gets jealous or upset. You know what I mean? So it's like this deep connection that they get to have. There's absolutely no sex, Right. And I just think that's beautiful.
Well, and I think that's a big piece of this is that people, just like any coming out, or people as they start to hear about something that's not heteronormative, so to speak. And I hate to even bring up heteronormative in this conversation because it's not about a sexual orientation even half the time. It's like, this is what I enjoy. It can have a sexual orientation piece to it because you may have a polyamorous relationship in a heteronormative relationship, and then you may have a partner who is the same sex that you enjoy being with, but you may not sexually enjoy being with them, or you might. So there's lots of different things. But what I find really powerful in this is when you take the quote unquote heteronormative stuff out of the conversation, what you end up having happen is you just start connecting with people because they're people.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. To give you an example of that too, I write a blog, as you know, and I post in a lot of different forums. And just in terms of, heteronormative or race or anything like that, I post in a forum that's called Black and Poly. And at one point somebody had commented, what does Kitty Chambliss's post have to do with Black and Poly? And I was like, well, I don't view people in terms of their skin color. I just like what you said, I view people as people.
Right.
And we're all just here, doing the best that we can, trying to live a good life. And, as another aside with that is what I love about polyamory is we all get to have the freedom to be ourselves, the freedom to just learn who we are, show up as who we are, and then have the freedom of choice to build those relationships any way that we want.
So this is something that I know comes up when I get into these discussions about, polyamory. And it's always with someone who's like, I could never do that. I'm like, right. Well, yeah, that means then this isn't for you.
Exactly.
It's that simple. But, the first thing that they come up with was, well, how do they do this without getting jealous? I'm like, again, this isn't for you. If you have to ask that question, this isn't for you. Most people that I know who are in polyamorous relationships have probably worked really well and really hard on their jealousy issues, if they even exist to begin with. And they keep it very open and honest. I think that's the difference. So how do, you or people in polyamorous relationships address the jealousy piece?
I'm so glad you asked that question. And the first thing I like to tell people is there are feelings that we have that don't feel good, right? So jealousy is definitely a feeling that we don't enjoy, sadness, we don't enjoy it. But some of the training that you and I have had as coaches, we understand that feelings are just that. They're not good or bad. They're just part of the spectrum of our energy and being human. So there's always going to be moments in our lives where we feel jealous, whether you're monogamous, whether you're polyamorous, it doesn't matter, in your job, in your relationships. So it's simply a feeling that we all experience. There's nothing to be ashamed of about it. I think the difference in polyamory is I do believe some people are naturally more jealous than other people, but I can tell you firsthand, I definitely experience jealousy. I experience it in my polyamorous relationships as well. The difference is that I work very, very hard, like you said, on my communication skills, on my self-esteem and my feelings of self-worth, on my personal growth, and on being my own best friend. I think that we can't say enough about really just, learning to feed your soul and just, really stand in your power of who you are. And when it is necessary, when you do determine you do need to talk to your partner, to really think it through instead of just flying off the handle, think it through and use some of those communication skills. One of the ones I love is nonviolent communication, to express your feelings and resolve it like adults, and then make requests. Sometimes the request might be, I need you to spend some more time with me, or the request might be, can we make this one thing just for you and I, and the person still has the autonomy to say yes or no, but then it becomes a healthy discussion in a healthy relationship. And I think, that's the difference, is how hard some of us do work on that feeling of jealousy.
Well, I think the nonviolent communication is huge. I know I work with people all the time in that. And the first time, if they're not familiar with it, and so that's why I want to delve into it a little bit here, is if you're not familiar with it, it is finding a pathway where it's not a finger pointing. It's not a, you did this, you did that sort of scenario. One of my best examples is, if somebody's angry about something and you're feeling the pain of that anger, it really is. So this is what you just showed me is upsetting you, and this is how it made me feel, and I'm wondering if that's what your intention was to make me feel this way. That's a nonviolent communication. You acknowledge what's happened, and you acknowledge how it made you feel, but you come back with, I'm wondering if that's what you intended for me to feel. So in jealousy, it could be, I noticed you're spending a whole lot more time with your boyfriend, if we were in a polyamorous relationship, and it's really making me feel that I'm not as important to you. And I'm wondering if that's what you intend for me to feel. 9 times out of 10, that isn't what the person's intending whatsoever. But we tend to jump to these conclusions so often in our relationships, regardless of, whether it's a regular, heteronormative monogamous relationship or whatever it may be. And we don't take the time to stop and breathe, number one, and really think and let it set in of, okay, what's really going on here and what's really going on for me?
Yeah.
What might be actually going on for the other person? And that's where I think so much of this comes up. And that's why nonviolent communication is so powerful. It gives you the open doorways to really communicate in a way that most of us weren't taught to communicate.
I agree. And it's helped me out in so many situations. And I also just recently understood more the concept that kind of goes along with nonviolent communication, like hand in hand, which is just owning your shit. And what I mean by that too is owning your own emotions. I think it is when we're trying not to blame the other person for how we feel. I think it's important to realize that we own our emotions. It's our thoughts that create our emotions, which then create our actions. Yep. And it's important to using nonviolent communication is a great way to do it. A nice framework to really, take that pause, really think about what you're feeling, identify it. And anger is sometimes, or jealousy also, are like surface emotions where there might be something underneath it, like hurt or disappointment, And then identifying, why are you feeling that? And what is the need that's not being satisfied? And then coming from a place, like you said, of non-blaming and non-criticizing and be able to express that to the other person. And then there's also nonviolent listening where, I love the phrase about, what we say is about us and what others hear is about them. Mm-hmm. But you can also listen in a nonviolent way where you're not trying to hear blame and criticism. Now this is challenging, but even if somebody is blaming or criticizing you, you can work to hear what need might be not being met underneath that. And it's amazing how much less drama you can have in your life.
It is amazing. And the thing about less drama is you get to choose to have less drama too. And most of us, I don't think we, at times, especially when we're in the heat of the moment, we don't know how to choose to have that less drama in our lives. Something that Kitty just did that kind of went by there. And it's so, true confessions, we've both been trained in the same coaching school. But she did one of the core principles, which is our thoughts create the feelings, which create the behavior. And the more you can start to really understand that pattern, the more you can actually start to shift things. So when we're coaching people, we kind of can see that this is the thought they're having. And then we'll ask them, so what feeling did that bring up for you? What started happening for you in that moment? And typically clients will say, this. I started feeling jealous. I started feeling like not good enough. I felt like I was, being cast aside. Okay, so then what did you do with that? Well, this is how I acted out, Now, the key is, and you can do this with yourself, so that's why I'm sharing it, you can go and look at something like that's happened for you. Once you say what the behavior is to really look at it and go, okay, I can see why you did that. That sounds like it was really painful. It sounds like it made you feel, insecure. It made you feel like less loved or whatever it is. So then what you do is you go back through the scenario again, but when you go back through it, and that's why I'm sharing this, because you can actually do this with yourself, is to say, okay, if I started with a different thought about the situation, a new thought, a fresh thought, a positive thought about the situation, then how do I feel? And then what's the new behavior? And I think this is one of the most powerful tools that I know I use daily with my clients and with myself. Because as soon as I start going down the dark, ugly rabbit hole of God, life sucks, I'm like, okay, so what's the new thought you could have around life sucks, Rick?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to jump on that because you so beautifully delivered it, and I wanted to make sure. I'm like, okay, there's a moment in the day
That's awesome.
Need to bring forward, because it's one of the most powerful ways. Not only if you're considering how do I do a polyamorous life, it's powerful for whatever you're doing, because our thoughts are what drives our feelings that then drive, as you said, the actions and the behaviors. So what did you learn from yourself as you started going through this to kind of start coping with some of these jealousies and things? What were some of the things you did to really start getting past that?
Well, I guess I tend to, whenever I'm having an issue, I tend to go overboard in educating myself. And I definitely try not to come from a, blaming and freaking out place if I'm able to. So when I'm able to, I do try to read lots of various books like Nonviolent Communication, or go to conferences and learn a lot that way. But also when I'm in that, say I'm in that jealous moment or something like that, I experimented with different techniques. So one thing that I recommend, if you are having an overwhelming emotion, is to realize, hey, I'm having an overwhelming emotion and I'm probably not going to be able to think or act very well right now, and to kind of give yourself a timeout. I've definitely done that. So if I did have, say my husband was being very affectionate with his girlfriend and I was feeling a little insecure that day, I might just, say, hey, I'm going to excuse myself and just, go take 10 minutes and kind of, center myself. I meditate every day. And I would also say that practicing meditation every day really helps keep me grounded and centered. But also if I am having that highly charged emotional moment, because I meditate every day, I can kind of calm myself down pretty quickly. And then I think the next thing is to just realize that you may not know yet what the best action to take. So to, I guess, forgive yourself for having that emotion and to maybe almost flying off the handle, and give yourself permission to shelve that until later. And later when I'm calm, I may journal about it or think it through or go to one of those books I read earlier and really try to almost, analyze where I'm at. And this kind of goes back to our earlier conversation about owning your shit. Like part of owning your shit is owning your emotions and analyzing them yourself before you go pointing the finger at everybody else about what's going on. Yeah. And then I try and also in that scenario see, do I need to work on myself here? Is this about, something I need to work on with my insecurity? Or do I need to have a conversation where I then make a request? Mm-hmm. Or maybe I have a conversation where I'm like, hey, I don't exactly know what's going on, but I feel like I need to talk this through with you to keep our relationship healthy. Yep. You can talk it through with me while I figure this out. Maybe we can figure it out together. And, to come from that kind of grounded place later when I'm calm. And that's helped me a lot.
That's great advice. So as you were talking, Kitty, one of the things that I was thinking of was, first of all, about shift your shit stuff. I just did a podcast about this. Actually, we're recording this on the Friday before Memorial Day. And the podcast that went up, number 176, is about shifting your shit or getting into your shift. So go listen to that one. Kitty's been bringing that up quite a bit about, how do you get over your shit? I think that little podcast will help everyone in that arena. But as you were talking about the jealousy and stuff, I think most of those emotions that we feel when we're in those spaces, like Kitty was saying, is very similar to what Tony Robbins talks about. And I did some work becoming certified in some of his work as a coach. There's 6 human needs. The 6 human needs are certainty, variety, significance, love and connection, growth, and contribution. And anytime we get our button pushed, one of those needs isn't being met. And I think if you start to sit back and think, as Kitty was talking about the jealousy thing, somewhere in there, and I'm going to pick on the one I think it was, there was some piece of not feeling significant in your husband's eyes when he was with his girlfriend. That's probably what it was all about. Or maybe you didn't feel as loved and connected to him. When we can bring these 6 things alive and we can go, okay, what's really happening for me in this moment? You can pretty much get to, okay, certainty. Maybe you weren't feeling real certain about your relationship at that point in time. Mm-hmm. These are really powerful tools to help us really step into understanding who we are and how we're being in that moment.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
I love that you shared those 6 core human needs. That's awesome. And and you're right. I mean, in that situation, I would say it was partly for me love and connection, partly because I love affection. Mm-hmm. Physical touch is one of my love languages, to borrow another tool.
Yeah.
And so that was getting tweaked in that moment. But I loved how you described the 6 core human needs, because I think it's important for us to take responsibility for our own thoughts and feelings. And that's why I think it's important to, go back and journal or think on your own, why was I getting tweaked, before you go and say, instead of having a confrontation, then you can have instead a very healthy and hopefully connection-filled conversation with your loved one.
So when you come across people who are like, okay, you guys are just weird, this is all about a sexual thing, how do you have an open, educated conversation with someone like that?
Well, like you insinuated earlier, I definitely try to stress that it is definitely not all about sex. One of the myths of polyamory is that it's one big orgy. We're just here, having orgies every day. And it's not like that at all. I think a lot of the conversations that you and I are having about relationships are just kind of underscoring the fact that these are simply relationships. The only difference is that there's more of them and that they might have a sexual component. They definitely have an intimacy component that is emotional, and it may be sexual or it may not. And so it's really just taking relationships and multiplying them. And then I also just try and underscore that we all, in my mind, have the right to self-determination and the pursuit of happiness. So I went through a period of my life for about 5 years where I was struggling with depression. And when I came out the other side of that, after my midlife crisis that's when I identified as polyamorous. And it's partly because I thought, monogamy just was not working out for me personally. And I believe that we all should have the right and the freedom to choose whatever makes us happy, whatever makes us fulfilled. And so if polyamory works for that person and it doesn't for you, just let them, live their life. I mean, be happy for them that they found what works for them.
But I think you just hit the nail on the head. This is why people get so screwed up around this stuff is they don't know how to let people just live their lives. Doesn't mean you have to live the lives of those people. Yeah. Let people live their lives. Plain and simple. A couple of weeks ago, I was speaking at a high school, and one young man, which I've already talked about this a couple of times on the show, but I think it's poignant to this conversation. He raised his hand to ask a question. He goes, well, how do you feel about someone like me? Okay. Junior or senior. He was in the junior senior class that we were there. And he said, how do you feel about someone like me who really doesn't understand people like you that are gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender? First of all, I thought it was a great question at that young age to be able to say to an old dog like me, 15-year-old guy, hey, how do you feel about somebody like me? But then what I said to him was, I think it's a perfect opportunity for you and I to sit down and have a conversation and try to understand each other. That doesn't happen enough. Yeah. I'll take this stuff on and think, okay, well, because of the way you're living, now I need to fix you so that, and the thing is you don't need to fix, you don't have to live their life. You can just allow people to live their life their way and move on and just move on, simply move on. That's what it takes. So what's been the most challenging thing for you being in a polyamorous relationship?
I honestly would say, believe it or not, I wouldn't say jealousy is the number one problem. I think the biggest problem I've had is kind of what you're implying right now and in the conversation that started our friendship, which is the coming out process and other people's judgments and how I obviously am very invested in my relationships, and whether that's a relationship with a partner or it's a relationship with a friend, I'm very invested. I really believe that we can improve the quality of our entire lives by improving the quality of our relationships. And I found that first of all, coming out is challenging mainly because of my own fear.
Yep.
And most of the time it went well, but there are other times where coming out did not go well, or there were other times where to my face, the person said, oh, I accept you. And then, several years later, our relationship is in shambles. And, I have to wonder if it's probably because they don't actually accept the way I like to live my life. So I would say it's trying to live in a world that is, very heteronormative monogamy focused and also very traditionally family focused. My family does not look like the average family. Mm-hmm. My household is my husband, my boyfriend, and my 2 cats and myself. That is not a normal looking family. Normal doesn't mean unhealthy. We have a very happy, loving household.
Yeah. And you just took me back to the conversations I had with my children at a very, very young age. And then throughout their younger lives, as we, navigated them having a gay dad and then living with gay fathers. And what I always said to them is, we are just another flavor of family. Mm-hmm. I didn't say different. I didn't say normal or abnormal. I just said we are a different flavor of family, and there's lots of different flavors of family. And the reason I use those words, mm-hmm. which I think most people will understand why I use those words, is because ice cream was kind of something kids can relate to, mm-hmm. or a flavor of a donut or whatever. And it helped them really begin to go, oh, okay, yeah, so we're just like a different kind of donut or a different kind of ice cream. And the more that they got confident in that, the easier it was for all of us to just be present. They went to all the same schools growing up, but I remember their elementary school years the most. And there really wasn't anybody in their elementary school. I don't say everybody knew, but all their teachers knew. They knew what kind of family they came from. The principals knew. And I was very open about it. And they saw, a healthy gay relationship being manifested. They saw a relationship with an wife and an ex-husband being very well handled and all these sort of things. And I think that's when you start to finally realize, yes, it is. It's still difficult. And you're coming out every day, doing the different kinds of work that you do and being who you are. The same way every day I'm coming out. Every day we're coming out to do something. But what I invite everybody to realize is everybody's coming out every day. There's some piece of you that you're not wanting somebody to see, but finally you decide it's important for somebody to see that. And it could be your political views. It could be the way you like to spend money. It could be, the kind of food you like to eat or don't like to eat. We're all coming out in different ways every day. And if we could just embrace that, man, what a difference it would make in our society to just really embrace one another with all those different coming out stories.
That is beautiful. I just loved everything that you said. And I think it's really important to just also honor ourselves for being brave and having the courage to just simply be who you are and then express your authentic self to other people. But also if somebody, is coming out to you with their authentic self to, acknowledge the courage that it took for them to do that, and really let them stand in their power, and honor that, because it's also a vulnerable place to be.
Yeah. So the polyamory, I know we've touched on a little bit back and forth, but it can be lots of different layers of how you do a relationship, right? There isn't we already talked about, there really isn't any one way, but for people who are just starting to wrap their head around it, I want to try to at least give them some different framework here. So there can be a polyamorous intellectual, intimate polyamorous relationship. There can be an emotional polyamorous relationship. There can be a sexual one. There can be a polyamorous relationship that happens within your own home. It can be one that happens in your home and outside of your home, in your city, outside of your city. I mean, the list goes on, right?
Correct. Yeah. And the way we would call that constellation is a polycule. So there are so many different ways to have your polycule, or you could also call it a modern family. But I say polycule partly because I know a lot of my clients or colleagues have partners all over the country or all over the world. So there might be somebody could identify as polyamorous and have no partners. Another person that a friend of mine lives with his partner who's a woman and she's married to her husband and they live with their collective 5 children. There's other people that I know who may have a live-in partner who they would consider their primary, but they have 3 satellite partners that they visit all over the country, sometimes once a year. There's a speaker who did a keynote last year at the Beyond Love conference who spoke about that he counts that he has about, I think he called them 8 sweeties. And some of those sweeties he never had sex with, but he connects with them every single day, whether it's through text or something along those lines, a very intimate relationship. So he counts them as a sweetie. Some of them might be the same gender as him, but he may not have an intimate relationship, but he counted them as part of his basically inner circle is another way maybe to describe it. Right. But some were sexual, some were just very intimate and emotional and close. And I think the way he described it was they're just people that, he would count on. Like if he was on his deathbed, he would want them all surrounding him, like people that he just truly, truly loved. And I think what's beautiful about identifying as polyamorous, if that's how you want to identify, is I think it just kind of gives that larger framework for what that can look like in somebody's life, and just expresses like, I am open to multiple loving relationships.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask the listeners to do something. I would love to have you rewind about the last minute or two that Kitty's been talking. And I want you to re-listen to the words she said. But I want you to think about it from a friendship basis. Because everything she just said is probably everything you do in your normal, everyday friendship relationships. There are so many people that you connect with. There's some that you connect with at a very intimate level. There's some that you just connect with on kind of a casual level. There's some of them, I know I have friends that Kitty being one of them, that I would say, man, I love you. I love you very much. And there's nothing beyond that. And I have male friends that are heterosexual that I say the same thing to, man, I really love you. And I do. I really love those guys. But the reason I want you to rewind is because I want you to put it into perspective, especially if you are starting to come out in any way, shape, or form, because this is where you're going to find your circle. When you realize, oh, wow, these people are going to get me on these levels. I don't care if you're coming out as gay, as bi, as whatever. what Kitty was talking about is really starting to see how you interact in those different places. And it's really not any different than you're kind of already having polyamorous relationships, so to speak, because you love people and you have intimate relationships with people in different ways. And the reason I'm bringing that up is this is where we start to normalize what we think is the divide between us as people. Did I miss anything there? I think I kind of got it.
I thought that was absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I love the way you said that. And I love that you highlighted that. And it really made me smile and get a warm feeling inside. So thank you.
Well, I kind of get this stuff because, I've been around doing this and I think love is love. And I have friends that I love very deeply. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm in a full-on relationship with them, but yet I am. We're all in relationships with people. Yeah. And it's just, now we have something that's, a new word, so to speak, that people are finding a way to put a framework around this to create a new family that works for them and relationships that work for them. It's amazing when we start to embrace and accept that, hey, here's where we are. This is how we do this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to add on to that, I think, maybe one of the differences between a classic monogamous relationship and a polyamorous one is, well, there's many similarities like you just highlighted. Really, the only difference is that it's more freedom of choice and more fluid instead of this box that we try to put people in. And that's what I love about it is it's less about having a box and more of a sense of again, freedom to let people just live their lives the way that suits them the best without judging them.
And, it's interesting because I've had, it's ironic to me. It blows my mind. I've had several conversations with people in my gay community, especially gay men, who have open relationships, but they bash the poly world. I'm like, what are you doing here? Yeah. It makes no sense to me. You're basically having a poly relationship. Well, yeah, but I'm not, I'm not having something with this person on a regular basis. And of course, I call bullshit on that. I'm like, I know how many times you've come to me in a drunken state and told me how many times you've had sex with that person. So guess what? You are having a poly relationship. You just don't realize it or you don't want to embrace that, and others are like, yeah, I go hang out with my friend all the time. We cuddle and, but that's all we do. I'm like, well, then don't beat up the poly world. It blows my mind. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Please don't bash another group just because you think you're right. You may call it open relationship, but open is about as close to poly as I think you can get, especially if there is kind of what I call double dipping. If you're going and having an open relationship with the same person over and over again, you're kind of already there. So Well, just to add on to that too, one thing that jumped out at me is there's also the feeling of respect and honoring your partners, so if it's fine if you have a partner that you would consider a primary partner or your main squeeze, but honor those other people instead of, I almost find there's a feeling, I can't help not use the word, it just feels a little disrespectful to those people. Exactly. Obviously they're important to you. Obviously you care about them. So why diminish that? That's the word I was looking for. A couple of times I've gotten in those conversations and what I realized very quickly was they're in a one-sided open relationship. It's open for them to go do, but the other person doesn't know it's an open relationship. Well, there's where the defensiveness comes in. Right. This becomes like, wait, you're calling me on my shit here, and I don't like being called on my shit because you actually got what I'm doing. And, it's really, really interesting.
I gotcha.
So from your perspective, it's hard to believe that these shows go so quickly. I'd love from your perspective, if somebody is really struggling or maybe not struggling, they're wanting to make the big move or they're thinking, hey, maybe this is for me. What would be a piece of advice you'd love to leave the listeners with as we wrap up here, Kitty?
Absolutely. I would say my best piece of advice is to really get to know yourself. And we talked earlier about being your own best friend, but I will also go a step further and say to become your own self-expert and find out what are your core values. And I think it goes nicely with even what you were just talking about. One of my core values is integrity. So, so that's one of the reasons that I went down the polyamorous path and communication and things of that nature. But so I think for each individual, if you're going down the path of your life, your path becomes more clear when you can identify what your values are and then align your life according to those core values. And they may change over time. And this one quote that you're going to be familiar with, I love to say, It is better to follow the voice inside and be at war with the whole world than to follow the ways of the world and be at war with your deepest self. And I do believe it takes some courage and bravery to identify who your deepest self is, what your core values are, and then live your life accordingly, and then show up authentically as that person, because it may not conform to what everyone else is doing.
And Kitty really just dropped a huge value bomb there, because it is one of the biggest steps is to getting to know yourself. And I think both Kitty and I will admit it's not an easy journey. It is one of probably the toughest things you will ever do. And it's not okay, now we're here. It's a constant getting to know yourself. I know for me over the years, the time I came out to where I am now, every day I learn more about myself and how I want to be myself. This podcast is a good example of how I be myself. I don't care what anybody thinks of this podcast. I don't care if people don't like what I'm promoting or what I'm sharing, because this is me being myself. And so that journey may be tough at times for those of you who are listening, but trust both Kitty and I, it is well worth the journey.
Absolutely.
Really well worth the journey to dig in and find those places where you really know yourself, so that you can stand against what everybody else in the world is telling you. You have to be this. It's a powerful place. So we have been working on this for a while to get you here. I'm so glad we did. And I'm so glad you've shared yourself so openly and so beautifully with my listeners today, Kitty. I love you. You know that.
I love you too. And it is such a pleasure to share this journey and to have another just amazingly awesome conversation with you. I just love talking to you, and I love you so much. So thank you for having me.
And I can't wait. It'll be just another month or so. We'll be able to see each other again and hang out and have some more great conversations. And I actually think we might be doing something together when we get to Portland. We talked.
Yes.
We're start working on that too.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks for sharing. This is a beautiful story. It's one that we haven't had a lot on the Coming Out Lounge, so I'm glad we got it, especially during Pride Month, where it's all about taking pride in who you are. It doesn't matter if you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, poly, non-poly, whatever it is, just be yourself and be proud of that. That's what I think Pride Month's about. Yes, it's an LGBTQ sort of thing, but I think Pride is really about truly everyone being who they're meant to be. So thanks for being here on the podcast with me. Yep, that's it. That means it's time to say goodbye to another episode of the Coming Out Lounge. I'm so glad you joined me. I'm Rick Clemens, the Coming Out Coach, that guy who helps you simplify your life to make the big, bold moves you've got coming your way. And I want to say thank you for just listening, giving us ratings and reviews, wherever you give us ratings and reviews, for however you're sharing us with the world, because you know what? You're helping make the world a better place. Now, I also know that some of you that are listening are like, I need to make a move. I need to do something big. One of the best ways to make an immediate move is to go to thecomingoutlounge.com and look for the coaching button. Yeah, there's some little buttons on the show pages and on the homepage that talk about the coaching sessions that dive right in to start doing some coaching with me around specific subjects around coming out. I'd love to work with you on those, so go check that out. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, always reach out to us at 949-371-8559, 949-371-8559, or you can also drop me a line at rick@rickclemens.com, and that is Clemens, Clemons, rick@rickclemens.com, and I'd love to hear from you and chat back and forth about whatever's going on in your life. But until then, never stop stepping out, stepping up, and stepping into living your powerful truth, because it's simple. Be bold to live life uncloseted. Take care, everyone.